Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beer and Money. My name is Ryan Burklo.
And I'm Alex Collins.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about really kind of the best way for you to be your best is actually to figure out who you don't want to be. And this topic came up. I'm reading the book called The Pathless Path by Paul Millard. And the whole premise of the book is, are you running your life in a default manner, like the stereotypical traditional way where you're working for a corporate company and your focus is more on your work than anything in your life? And then the traditional like retirement where you're waiting to live life until you retire. And
that is a rough way to live life.
Yeah. And he's brought up several things, even though you and I don't have like a corporate employer in the fashion that, this guy's talking into. You and I still, well, I'll speak for myself. I still fall into a default path or default mindset actually sometimes because, that's how my parents lived and that's how I was raised with different experience. And so I have to remind myself, like, I don't have to go that same pathway. And one of the things in his book was he started saying, how do you become the person you want to be or attain the goals that you want to accomplish or live the life that you want to live if you don't know it? And the best way to figure that out or best way to attain it or the best way to be consistent about getting there is possibly to figure out what life or who you don't want to become.
Yeah.
So that's today. So we're going to have 3 reasons why you should actually write down and have a conversation with yourself and maybe your spouse around who you don't want to be. But before we dive into that, Mr. Collins, what are you drinking today?
Today, I am drinking the Sky Kraken Hazy IPA from Fremont. So this is it's a beer we've done before. Fremont is a local brewery. They're one of the older microbrew. I mean, they're no longer a microbrew. They're kind of a household name here in Seattle. But this is just a great beer, and it's an homage to the NHL team here in Seattle, the Kraken.
Yeah, every time I go to a Kraken game, I can't not order that one. And plus, it's a good beer. So
it's a very good beer.
Yeah, solid one. So I am having by Red Hook. It's a hazy Big Ballard IPA. I can't recall if I've ever had this or not.
The Big Ballard it's a good beer. It's a Red Hook, original favorite. It's good stuff.
What's great about it that I just noticed is on the can it says, "Yeah, sure, you betcha." So
referencing Ballard.
Yeah, so that kind of cracked me up. Looks like it's 8.7% alcohol, so it's gonna be a heavier alcohol content, which should make this episode recording even better.
The Sky Kraken clocks in at 5.5. It's not super hoppy. It doesn't have. I didn't look up the IBUs, but my guess is that this is in the 50-ish range for IBUs. This is an incredibly good drinkable beer. The Big Ballard is it's a big, bold IPA that's going to kind of punch you in the face.
Yeah, it definitely punched me in the face in a good way. I actually really like that first sip. I'm looking forward to my second sip already. So definitely check them out. Red Hook. They used to be in Woodinville. Now they're back in Seattle and kind of went back to that microbrew state because I think they sold the original one. So check them out for a solid beer as well as Fremont Brewery. So let's dive into this, Alex. I'd love to, we've got these 3 reasons and we definitely want to hit on those 3 reasons. But I think I'd love to talk with you about how have you ever thought of this, if at all, like just kind of a just open discussion. So our listeners maybe they'll stop listening to us after this. I don't know.
Sure.
But, as I was reading it, right, like you and I have a very lucky, blessed life that I think we sometimes can forget, given this is really all, especially for you, all you've known for your working years for the most part since leaving college.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is newer for me, newer as in like, 15 years ago, newer. So it's not new anymore. But this,
You had a career. You did a few things prior to becoming a financial advisor.
right, right. And so what's really interesting is you and I have had plenty of conversations around our thoughts around money, and we keep saying it's a tool. And I think you and I, well, I'll speak for myself. I will fall in, even though I know it's a tool, I will still fall into the trap of money being something more than it is. And what I mean by that is it might be like, maybe the new shiny object. It might even be, no, it's not might. It can definitely, I can definitely get into a let me show off mode in a certain scenario.
Or
And not,
even just like jealous of what somebody else is doing.
yeah. And it's not from a derogatory thing at all. It's just more of, I really want to be successful, and I want people to be able to have that same success. And sometimes I think I need to show it with things rather than just live it.
What
And I don't talk about how my life is all that much. So I think that's another aspect that you don't really get to see or hear unless you talk to someone that has it. So like this type of conversation normally happens with like my better friends
mm-hmm.
and, some of the clients to some degree. Then rather, how do I show what I've got when I'm just walking around, right?
Well,
Which
I
is
mean
why
this
I think this creeps up, at least in my life.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the conversation that you brought up. Now, it must have been 6 months ago about the flashy car, where like you see the car getting valeted, and you're like, oh wow, that's a flashy car. I love that car. You don't pay any attention to the person that's driving it,
Nope.
and like none whatsoever. But it's one of the and like the basic conversation behind that podcast was the things that make us financially successful are things that you don't outwardly see. It's things that we see. And oftentimes, the people that have the flashy car are doing a terrible job in terms of like a rate of return. They're not properly protecting themselves or their assets. They're not properly accumulating. They're getting the shiny thing, the wristwatch that like is, has a lot of bling to it, or the fancy car, or the fancy house, or whatever else. And those things aren't necessarily inherently bad. Where they can cause problems and be bad is when they crowd out our ability to do the things that are going to make us financially successful, which is saving 15 to 20% of your income, properly protecting your income, making sure that you're being as efficient and effective with where you're putting your money as possible.
Well, what's interesting, so everything you're saying, obviously we believe, but to go a step deeper, Alex, how many of our listeners, and maybe you and I, and I don't know that we need to get this deep. I don't think we have the time, frankly, to get this deep. But the question that I'll have our listeners consider is, do you even know what success is?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about finances. What is success in general to you, right? Is it the big house, the fancy cars, the Rolex watch, the fancy vacation, like the traditional path that we all are taught, or maybe watch, right? Like we're like everything's advertised, Instagram, social media, everything's about like the bigger, better things. But is that really, if you really look at the people that have all of that, I'd argue a lot of them are not actually happy. Like the more I learn about these people's lives that are worth billions of dollars, I don't want that life.
Oh, 100%. It goes back to exactly this. Like, so you and I were talking the other day about something that, like, so my daughter built a fort, and she goes, "Hey, Dad, will you spend the night sleeping next to me in the fort?" And your comment just, I loved it. And like, it made me realize, and like, I've now slept in the forts that my daughter makes usually about once a weekend now since then, because I'm not going to get a chance to do this when she's 13 or 15 or 18. I don't know when she's going to grow out of this, but oh my God, is it amazing to be able to spend that time with her doing something that she loves, and we've figured out a way to make it so that my back isn't killing me in the morning. Um, but it's one of those things that like I built forts as a kid growing up, and like did not have or even contemplate the idea of spending the night in the fort. And like I would have loved doing this with my dad or with my buddies or whatever else. And it wasn't reality. So to be able to do this with my daughter is just absolutely special.
Yeah. So what, going back to, I love that you shared that story because definition of success, maybe the definition of success for any listener or you or any of that matter is having the capacity to do that and not stress about money or stress about work or stress about life and be able to be in the moment and do that without even questioning it. Like
Yeah.
without a second thought, being there.
Yeah. Well,
Like
and
that's
like,
pretty successful. And I would argue most Americans don't have that.
right. And like what it amounted to is I needed to go spend a couple $100 on like a nice
What it was
mattress.
is Heather kicked you out. Let's just call it what it was. Heather was like, "You're out." I'm joking.
That's funny, but no. It was the ability to just go spend a couple $100 on like nice air mattresses that we're going to take with us this summer when we go camping. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was like being able to do dual purpose for stuff, and then like just actually spending more than like 30 seconds on, do I want to spend the night in a fort? God, that's going to be massively uncomfortable. No, I don't. To then thinking about it from like, okay, what is this going to do for the relationship that I have with my daughter, and how special is it going to be? And like, oh my God, yes, I want this.
Right.
And so it was a cool thing. And like, it's that type of stuff where like you and I care way more about like being successful with our families and having the ability to like not worry about money because we know that we're doing the right things to be able to spend quality time, whether it's taking family vacations or being able to do something special that is going to create those lasting family memories that we hold dear, not not necessarily today or tomorrow. Yeah, it's cool when we're doing it, but it's more of like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, remembering the trip that we took with our parents, went and saw the World Cup or whatever it is, and thinking back on like, hey, I am so thankful that I got a chance to do that with my dad, my daughter, my wife, whoever it is.
And I think so. Kind of bring this around to our title here, right? So that book I read, The Pathless Path, right, by Paul Millard, he brought up a point of like writing down. You should actually sit down and write down who you don't want to be. And it hit me because I started thinking of like the different things I don't want to be. I don't want to be the father that misses their kids' plays or activities, right? I don't want to be the spouse that focuses only on work. I don't want, like, I started listing all these different things that I don't want to be. And for the most part, I think I'm doing an okay job of not being that, but I wouldn't, I'd be lying if I said that I'm 100% perfect in those manners. And I wonder, you and I do a lot of conversations like this off the podcast, not recorded. And I think you and I help each other out with that, because you'll say something that I haven't thought of, and maybe I do the same for you, which has us think differently about stuff. And what's interesting about this is you and I, for the most part, I think know what we want and the life that we want to accomplish. But that changes over time too. Like really over the last couple of years, I've started to look at different things that I thought I wanted and what that life is. And that's the ever evolving piece of life. And so when we look at, when you know what you don't want to be, how much easier is it to figure out what goals you actually have? Because
Yeah.
that's a question I think many people have. Like when we sit down with clients, we ask, what are your goals? And they always give us the stereotypical answers. Well, I want to someday retire. I want to make sure I'm on the right path. I want to make sure, right? It's always, and it's not that they're lying. I want to be clear about that. It's not that they're lying. It's almost like what they've read and thought of, because it's not what they've read in that traditional default stuff that's out there.
Well, it's almost kind of like they've adopted somebody else's goals, or this is the thing that
Exactly.
they have been taught to want or need or request, whether it's having the house paid off or being able to retire without really understanding, like, okay, what does retirement mean?
What, and that was, it's a common question. So a question that I asked, it was a newer client a couple months ago, and I said, "You keep saying that you want to stop making your company richer, and you want to get richer." And I said, "If you were rich right now, what changes? What does that mean to you? What does that lifestyle look like?" And this is when she goes, and I think this is why she hired us. She said, "I don't know. I've never thought of it that way."
Yeah.
All she thought of was, I'm working my tail off and I know I'm making my company richer, but I'm questioning what I'm doing for myself.
Well, and like that is the secret sauce right there, is being able to identify, like, okay, what is it that matters to me? What is important? Why is it important? And then the next step, and this is, say, going back to our like what we're talking about. Step number 2 is trying to figure out, like, okay, what are the activities that we need to focus on to be able to accomplish whatever our goal is, whatever it is that we want to be, whatever we want to become, or whatever we want to avoid becoming.
Oh, exactly. If you don't want to be the deadbeat father, maybe have some plan of action so that you have conversations with your kids, like actually go out and enjoy time with your kids, going to their activities, right? Maybe it's father-daughter time for a full day where the daughter gets to choose whatever they want and you get to be completely present without your stupid cell phone in front of them, which I say that, and I don't mean that I'm pointing the finger at anyone. If anything, I'm pointing the finger at myself.
I was good,
And
like
right.
me.
So what's the quality? Like, I've done my darndest as of late to say at 5:30, my phone goes away. Like, Alex texts me later on in the day sometimes, and I don't respond to him because I'm trying not to look at the phone. Now, I've
I'm
got the
glad that
watch
that
on,
just
so
means that I'm glad that that means that you just don't love me anymore, man.
that's not at all what it means, but take it however you want.
Fair.
But the point is I know what I don't want to be, so I'm focusing on activity to not become that.
Right.
So it's encouraging me, at least. Now, I'd be curious to know our listeners, is this helpful looking at from the negative aspect that we are right now?
Well, and like, think about it from, like, sometimes people get hung up on focusing on the negative, or like trying to focus on the positive or things of that nature. And you and I were talking about this as a sports analogy, and the folks that are the most driven, that succeed the most at sports, when you actually get down and talk to them in an honest moment, most of them will tell you it's not that they're driven to win. Winning isn't everything. It's they hate losing. They hate not being able to do everything that they possibly can within their power to help their team and themselves succeed. I'm reminded of the Gretzky quote: "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." This isn't about being afraid of failure and therefore striving never to fail. No, we learn through failure, but we don't want to repeat those lessons. It's important to learn every time we have a moment of failure, to learn to get better so that we can avoid that in the future and be the characteristics that we want. Be more present with our family, spend more quality time, be able to accomplish all the things that we love doing. And most of them have very little to do with money or work. It's all about the people in our lives. Now, most of it we can't do without getting the finances right. So we need to get the finances right. But at the same time, it's not about the money. It's about what the money allows us to do.
Exactly. So far we've talked about attaining your goals or figuring out what your goals are. We've talked about, focusing on the activity, right? Knowing what you don't want to become helps you to do those two things. And the third thing is maybe figuring out who you want to be.
Right.
Like, this might be, and this isn't, I think a lot of listeners might be thinking like this for like the 25-year-old.
Mm-mm.
I'd make the argument this might be for the 25-year-old. May not have all the negative aspects that, like, going through a career and beating down life, that maybe the 45 or 50-year-old might have, right? That changes how they interact, right? So maybe you're so stuck. Maybe you're the 50-year-old that's stuck on this traditional path and you've never even fathomed being something else. But deep down, that's actually the issue.
I mean, heck, I've talked to folks that are at retirement that are like, okay, cool, what's next?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they don't know what's next because they've never sat down and done this. And like those are the people that I'm actually the most worried about, is because they don't have a vision for what they want life to become. They think that they have attained some level of whatever because of something that society has input on top of them and they've accepted. And really it comes down to like, okay, cool. You tell me, what do you want to do? What does attaining retirement, what does that mean? Like, and most of the time, like if they've been working with me, we've been building out like, okay, does this mean that we're jumping in an RV and driving across the country? Does it mean that we're playing golf 3 times a week? Does it mean that we're lying on a beach drinking a drink out with a fruity umbrella? Like what?
A Mai Tai. Let's just call it a Mai Tai. Sure. I like
Daiquiri.
Pina Colada. Sorry, I shouldn't sing.
I mean, I'm just throwing out all of the cliches, right? But like so much
But
of it
most
is
people actually don't want that. That's the thing. It
right.
sounds great for a day or two a week, but in the grand schemes of life, like a retirement life, because that's what you're talking into right now, it's not what they really want because they would get bored out of their mind.
Right. And so like the people that succeed are like you start talking to them about like, okay, what do you want to do? And they have this grand vision of like turning their backyard into like a palatial garden, or they want to give back to their community. And so they're going to go volunteer in the community at whatever, or they're going to spend all their time with their grandkids, or like whatever the circumstance is. Figure out what you love and work towards that. And the sooner
Or,
that,
or in this episode, figure out what you don't want so that you figure out what you love.
right. And again, so much of it is what this is applicable, whether you're a teenager, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Hell, if you figured out when you're in your 90s, great. Like, does not matter. But this will give you the peace of mind that you want, and it will help you figure out the why behind all of the rest of everything that is so critical.
Yep. So real quick recap, the 3 reasons of figuring out what you don't want to be and why it matters is 1, it will help you attain your goals or maybe figure out your goals. 2, help you figure out what activities to focus on. And then 3, maybe helping you figure out who you want to be or what you want to become. Which takes us to the question of the day, Alex.
Our question today is, what are you afraid of becoming?
That's a scary question.
It really is.
I know we talked about it, but after you just said it, I'm like, oh, that's dark. But at the same time, it's actually, I think, extremely powerful when you know that.
And incredibly motivating.
Yeah. So head over to beerandmoney.net and there's a spot at the top that says contact us. I know, a crazy label for that, for you to contact us with either your answer or maybe more specifically, what did you get out of today that you want to maybe us to focus on talking more about? I know that today wasn't a lot about finances. This is more about like overall life and who you want to be and maybe who you don't want to be. But we do want to continue to talk about what's on your guys' mind. And so that's a great spot to reach out to us. We started this podcast to help you live the life that you want, which is the reason this was a topic of today. Because I wonder sometimes if we maybe live a default life or we don't know what life we want. So hope this episode is valuable for you. And as always, Mr. Collins.
Cheers.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Quantified Financial Partners, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. This material is intended for general public use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities LLC is not undertaking to provide investment advice or a recommendation for any specific individual or situation, or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity. Please contact a financial representative for guidance and information that is specific to your individual situation. Ryan and Alex are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities LLC, OSJ 200 Market Street, Suite 1850, Portland, Oregon 97201. Phone number 503-221-1226. Securities products and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Quantified Financial Partners is not an affiliate or subsidiary of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Ryan Burklo, CA Insurance License Number 0K24924. Alexander Collins, CA Insurance License Number 0H24806. Pinpoint number 2024-170116. Expiration February 2026.